Institutions that underpin prosperity in wealthy nations face mounting pressure, with one Nobel economist arguing the working class must be central to any fix. This is Omni View, episode 154. Daron Acemoglu, the Nobel laureate known for linking inclusive institutions to long-term national wealth, warned that the laws, property rights, and political constraints credited with Western prosperity now face serious strain. He spoke on the Reuters podcast, The Big View, with Peter Thal Larsen, and argued that effective responses must start by restoring economic security for ordinary workers rather than treating it as a secondary concern. Acemoglu's decades of comparative research across countries has shown that nations protecting broad access to contracts, independent courts, and limits on elite power achieve steadier growth than those built on narrow extraction. Reuters presented the remarks as a direct application of that historical evidence to current pressures on established democracies. The discussion framed worker security as the foundation for preserving liberal institutions rather than an optional add-on. Reuters noted that Acemoglu connects institutional erosion to risks of slower productivity and capital flight in wealthy economies. What happens next? Policymakers and voters will face choices about whether new measures widen or narrow those protections, with early tests likely to appear in labor and regulatory legislation over the coming months. Shifting now to a developing situation in Southeast Asia, authorities in Indonesia's South Sumatra province held a mass prayer for rain, while forest and peatland fires continued to generate choking haze across several districts. The event was organized as fires kept burning and air quality declined in affected areas. The Associated Press reported the prayer as a direct local response to the immediate smoke problem. Provincial officials described the gathering as one practical step available, while suppression efforts continued. The AP account emphasized that the haze had already spread to multiple regions and that the prayer reflected traditional communal action alongside ongoing firefighting. Officials have not announced a timeline for full containment, and residents in downwind areas continue to face reduced air quality. Next, attention turns to a technology and sovereignty debate in Britain. The data analytics company Palantir has moved to the center of British discussions about technological independence and foreign suppliers. The Economist examined the claims made against the firm and concluded that some of the company-specific concerns appear overstated. The analysis separated those narrower criticisms from wider policy questions about data control and reliance on overseas software providers. The Economist framed the episode as part of Britain's ongoing review of technology supply chains and national security. It presented the broader sovereignty concerns as legitimate, while noting that evidence tying specific risks uniquely to Palantir remains limited. The piece leaves open how future procurement decisions will balance those general worries against the firm's existing contracts. Meanwhile, scientists have restated a long-standing assessment of energy use and weather patterns. Researchers have reiterated that continued reliance on gas, oil, and coal will intensify heat waves, storms, floods, and droughts. The Associated Press summarized the statement as a restatement of established projections rather than new findings. The AP coverage tied the expected rise in extreme events directly to current consumption levels of those fuels. The report presented the warning as consistent with prior scientific consensus and focused on the link between fuel use and future weather intensity. No new numerical forecasts were introduced, and the emphasis remained on the connection between ongoing consumption and projected outcomes. Turning to markets, Reuters Breaking Views examined whether current oil prices, supported by supply limits, could settle at a permanently higher floor. The analysis considered structural constraints on production as one factor that might prevent prices from returning to earlier ranges. It weighed the possibility that those limits could keep prices elevated, while noting the outcome still depends on how demand and output decisions unfold. Reuters Breaking Views presented the higher price level as plausible under certain supply conditions, but avoided firm predictions. Observers will watch production announcements and demand data in the months ahead to see whether the floor holds. Now, some progress worth knowing about. Fire crews have begun to contain the Hawk Fire in the Sierra Nevada foothills near Reno, Nevada, after the blaze destroyed more than 30 homes. The fire grew rapidly after starting on Saturday, but containment efforts have since lowered the immediate threat to additional structures. The Associated Press described the shift from fast spread to controlled conditions as an update on a fire that had already caused significant property loss. Officials reported reduced danger to nearby neighborhoods while continuing to monitor remaining hotspots. Containment progress will determine whether further evacuations or damage occur in the coming days. Now, to really understand this story, there's something most coverage leaves out. Discussions of economic warnings often treat institutions as abstract rules instead of the concrete legal and political arrangements that decide who can invest, innovate, and retain returns. Acemoglu's research shows that countries maintaining broad property rights, constraints on elites, and open economic participation have produced higher and more durable growth than those built on narrow extraction. The mechanism works through incentives. When more people can start businesses, enforce contracts, and expect to keep gains, capital and talent tend to accumulate rather than leave or stay hidden. When those protections weaken, investment shifts toward short-term extraction or capital flight. Historical comparisons indicate that nations preserving independent courts, secure land titles, and limits on arbitrary state power sustained higher living standards over centuries than those concentrating opportunity among small groups. The same pattern appears in records of patent filings, business formation, and long-run income growth across former colonies that adopted different legal frameworks after independence. When protections erode, outcomes include slower productivity growth and higher emigration of skilled workers. When you hear claims that prosperity can be restored by changing one policy lever, check whether the change actually widens or narrows access to secure property rights and political voice. Surface-level tax cuts or spending programs produce different results depending on whether contract enforcement and political accountability stay intact. Next time a leader presents a single reform as decisive, ask which groups gain enforceable rights and which lose them, and compare those shifts to the historical record of what sustained broad-based growth. If you want to go deeper on today's lead story, compare how Reuters and The Economist are covering institutional and technological pressures on established economies. Tomorrow, watch for updates on whether containment lines around the Hawk Fire hold through the next Uri period. That's Omni View. The news can feel heavy, but understanding what's actually happening and what's being done about it beats doom scrolling every time. Stay curious. Pick one story from today and read it from a second outlet you don't usually open. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nera Network. Links in the show notes. Quick tip from the network. Try modern investing techniques next. Modern strategies for Canadian and US investors. Every Nera Network show is free at neranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at neranetwork.com gallery. Royalty-free under Creative Commons, download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.